Alrighty, y'all, the antibiotics, the fluoroquinolones. Let's see if we can finish this up real quickly. Cipro. How many Cipros do you see out there? Oh, my God. Lomafloxacin, Maxaquin, Norfloxacin, Noroxen, Oxafloxacin, Ofloxacin, Floxin. The ones that have the asterisks are for uncomplicated UTIs, especially if Septra or Bactrim shows an increased resistance in your community. Levofloxacin, Levaquin. Actually, it's too broad spectrum for a UTI. Some people use it and they shouldn't. Factive, which is gibafloxacin, moxifloxacin is effective against TB. You never use moxifloxacin for an uncomplicated UTI. Now, Levaquin can be used for a complicated UTI or prostatitis in males. But it's just not one you use for something simple. A simple first UTI, you would never put somebody on Levaquin. Now, look at the other warnings here. This is the highest risk group of drugs for C. diff. Well, my UTI is better. But I'm in the hospital for C. diff. By the way, you all, C. diff treatment today, we are moving very quickly toward stool transplants for everybody. Forget the antibiotics. We'll use a stool transplant. Anybody, give it. You can donate any given time for anybody. Just poop in a cup, and they'll blend it up. Check it for diseases, of course, but then they will infuse it right up the old rectum, and this is curative 94 to 97% of the time. You are replacing their microbiome with yours. Their entire flora is being replaced with good stuff. Rarely do we see the drugs work. Do you have a question, or just twirling your hair? Okay. Are you doing any stool transplants here in? No? Yes? Yeah. And honestly, we're seeing. I mean, why would you bother going through the flagell 3 or 4 times, then the vancomycin 3 or 4 times? They keep coming back with it, keep coming back with it, keep coming back with it. You can get. My brother would be happy to give me a pile of. You can get it from your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your person. You can grab them off the street and say, listen, I need a stool transplant. Can you help out? So, and then, of course, you're going to see more about this. This is huge. It's called fecal microbiota transplant. It's huge. It's big. It's good. It's effective. It's worth it's simple. But now the FDA is getting in on it. They want to regulate it, you all, because people were literally buying a blender. Yeah. Pooping into it. And poop. So the FDA wants to regulate it, which they should. I mean, just any old osterizer from the street. And then last but not least is the tendinitis. Very important. The acute tendinitis with these drugs can be debilitating. We've seen people with ruptured Achilles tendons from these drugs. Running down the street and boom, their Achilles just pops. Okay, then the macrolides, erythromycin, azithromycin, clarithromycin. As I mentioned, erythromycin, very dangerous drug, you all, with other drugs. Prolongs the QT interval. Low dose increases bowel motility in patients with gastroparesis. Low dose, 250 milligrams a day, can actually help your diabetics who have gastroparesis. Yeah, it boosts something in the bowel called motilin. Motilin, for motility. Zithromax, Z-Pak. How many people say, I want a Z-Pak, Z-Pak, Z-Pak? That's all they know. Give me Z-Pak. I'm going to Mexico. I need a Z-Pak. Don't drink the water. You can't have a Z-Pak. But I want a Z-Pak. No. Clarithromycin. Somebody will give it to them. I won't. I will not give them a Z-Pak for going to Mexico. It's your fault for going to Mexico and getting Montezuma's revenge in the first place. So do not take a Z-Pak. Don't take this with food. It's only 5 pills, you all. You will reduce the effectiveness of this drug by 50% if you take it with food. So it's got to be on an empty stomach. On the other hand, Biaxin should be taken with food to improve the bioavailability. This is annoying for patients and us. Well, the last time I took one of these, you told me not to take it with food. Well, it's a different drug. And clarithromycin increases DIG toxicity significantly. So if your patients are on DIG, you should not use clarithromycin. Okie dokie, mabs. Fabulous group of drugs. How are we doing on time there, Mike?
You got it. About 5 minutes of this thing.
Okay, so these monoclonal antibodies. If you have to be living in a cave to not know how fabulous these drugs are. They are coming out fast and furious. I think there's over 80 of them on the market today, and I'm telling you, every time I open up my computer, there's a new one that they're working on. So I've just given you a few of them here, but I want to explain the name of them. Last name MAB, which means what? Monoclonal antibody. In front of that is either an XI or a U. The XI means it comes from a mouse, murine. So we use the cells of a mouse to make these. The U means they come from human cells. So are you a man or are you a mouse? Now, you say, what difference does it make? Because people who are taking the ones from mice may have a cross-species reaction, taking something from another species. Or they may stop working because your body has formed antibodies to them and they don't work well anymore. The perfect example of this, you all, is infliximab. Infliximab comes from a mouse. We start people with Crohn's disease on this drug, and it may stop working after a while because of your own response to it. So then we will switch you to adalimumab, which is Humira. It's from a human. We don't see that same problem. Interesting. Now, the LI means it works in the immune system. So if you look at all these drugs I've just listed for you, all of them have an LI, and they're made either from a mouse or a human. So adalimumab, immune system, targeted against an inflammatory protein called tumor necrosis factor alpha that's responsible for the inflammation of Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, ankylosing spondylitis, ulcerative colitis. These drugs are used tons in GI medicine, tons in the world of rheumatology. I was sitting at a bar one time in a small island in the French West Indies. Sounds like a great story, doesn't it? So I'm sitting there just drinking something, I don't remember what, and this guy was sitting next to me. I said, "Do you come here often?" Just kidding. No. We were just a bunch of us at a party and having a great time, and I was sitting next to this guy, and he said, "Oh, Barb, what do you do?" And I said, "I'm a nurse. I run around teaching stuff." And he said, "I'm a rheumatologist at Johns Hopkins." And I said, "What in your career," he's my age, so we've both been around for 40 years. And I said, "What in your career has changed your practice the most?" Just curious. He said, "There's nothing like the monoclonal antibodies for rheumatoid arthritis." He said, 25 years ago, I used to have close to 100 people in my practice in wheelchairs from rheumatoid arthritis. They couldn't even get up out of a wheelchair. Now he has one patient in a wheelchair. And it's all because of these targeted therapies that stop this horrific inflammatory response. So, pretty amazing. He said Humira, Remicade, Cimzia have just been remarkable. Are there side effects? Yes. Can you get into trouble? Yes. Must you test them for TB before you put them on these drugs? Yes. Because the same stuff that's targeted is actually what keeps TB in check in your body. So if you target this TNF-alpha and stop it, and you've got a dormant TB, what will it do? Come out with a vengeance. So you've got to TB test everybody going on the first 4 drugs here. All right, we've got palivizumab, which is Synagis for RSV protection in babies. Omalizumab, which is Xolair, monoclonal antibody to IgE for people who have asthma. And I apologize, I think Xolair is spelled with a Z, not an X. But is it an X? X? Okay, that's correct. It's pronounced with a Z, Xolair. And then there's a new one, by the way, and I can't remember the name of it. It's brand new. It's another MAB. Same thing that Xolair does. And then the newest drug for lupus, new drug that's been out, haven't had lupus drugs out for years, is called belimumab, which is Benlysta. And it targets B cell activating factor to reduce the immune response in lupus patients. Wow. Zowie. Okay. I can see you're not sitting on the edge of your seat like you should be, but it is exciting. Tumors. Monoclonal antibodies for tumors. Same names, U for human, XI for mouse, but TU stands for tumor. So what's trastuzumab, I should say? You cancer nurses know this is a drug for breast cancer. It targets a specific epidermal growth factor called HER2/neu. The name of the drug is Herceptin. Fabulous. Do you know what it's done for women who are HER2/neu positive breast cancer patients? It's improved their survival by over 55%. And all these women in the past died. It's unbelievable. Okay, rituximab. Well, I'll tell you, you wish you had the patent on this drug. This amazing drug, Rituxan, targets CD20 receptors on B lymphocytes. Fancy way of saying they target B lymphocytes. They have improved the prognosis in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma by 70%. Wow. So, rituximab is a drug that is not only used for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but it has just also been looked at for chronic fatigue syndrome. They think that B lymphocytes are actually the culprit in chronic fatigue syndrome. So there are some studies out looking at it investigationally with incredible improvement in patients who have CFS. We don't even know what chronic fatigue syndrome is. We know it's there, and we know it absolutely is a clinical syndrome, but what in the heck caused it? We've looked, at every virus in the world, Epstein-Barr virus and cytomegalovirus and all these viruses, but we now know that the immune system plays a huge role in this fatigue. Now here's the problem. Rituximab costs $19,000 per shot. It's not cheap. So when we use, my best friend is being treated right now for mantle cell lymphoma, and they're giving her 4 shots of rituximab. It is literally $20,000 a shot with all the nursing care and all that stuff. So, but again, you now improve the prognosis of these patients by 70%. So it's well worth it. 4 shots once a week, and then she's done for however long. Hopefully it won't come back, or at least it will keep it in check. It's expensive stuff. It's all expensive stuff. Cetuximab, Erbitux, for colon cancer, targets an epidermal growth factor on the colon. This was the drug that Martha Stewart went to jail for, if you remember, many years ago. She lied to Congress. Oh, dear God, somebody lied to Congress. If everybody in Congress went to jail for lying, would be no one left, absolutely. The entire Capitol Hill would be emptied out. The sad news is, well, actually, she was in jail for 4 months. She enjoyed her 4 months. Remember, she got a poncho. Sorry. The funny part about this whole story was the company was called IM-Clone, is that made this. And the FDA had not approved it. So she was going to try insider trading to sell it or something, but she couldn't get it sold before she lied to Congress about the whole thing. So when she went to jail, the company that made it was $2.16 per share. She had like 1 million shares or something, some crazy amount. But while she was in jail in the 4 months, they approved the drug. The shares went to $96 a share, from $2 to $90. So she basically became a billionaire while she was in jail. Oh man, just when she got out. It was an amazing story. And she got a nice poncho from somebody when she was in jail. Anyway, so we got Tunjol, alemtuzumab, which is called Campath. I can't even tell you, and I won't sit here and tell you all the drugs that have the last name Mab. There are zillions of them. Bevacizumab, I'm going to mention these because they have a CI. CI means cardiac. They do something in the world of cardiac medicine. So bevacizumab is Avastin. You say, what's that? It targets epidermal growth factor on capillaries. It stops the growth of capillaries, new capillaries. How does a tumor grow? It needs neovascular new growths of capillaries. So this can stop tumor growth, and it's used directly into the eye to stop the neovascular growth in patients with macular degeneration as well as diabetes. Big old shot coming at your eyeball. Works. All right, abciximab, for those of you that work in emergency rooms, it's a drug to inhibit platelet aggregation. It works for non-STEMI MIs. Unbelievable stuff, you all. Okay, enough on that. Now, if there's any group of drugs that literally we all should bow down and say we are not worthy, these new drugs that have come out to treat cancer are truly miracles. They all have the last name Nib. They are all oral drugs. We are now talking cure in many cancers that we have never been able to cure before. We are talking cure in some cancers that are metastatic with these drugs. It's pretty amazing. And what they do is they're called tyrosine kinase inhibitors. They stop an enzyme in a signaling pathway of growth of almost all cancers. So if we have one uniform group of drugs that may work for every cancer in the world, it could be these drugs. They're coming out so fast my head is spinning trying to keep up with them. The first one out was in 2001. It was called Gleevec, imatinib. People who literally would die from chronic myelogenous leukemia, we now saw went into complete remission 70% of the time. An oral drug, you all. Just knocked the socks off of everybody. We've got gefitinib, which is Iressa for cancer, for lung cancer, non-small cell cancer of the lung, Tarceva, Sprycel, Tasigna, just unbelievably amazing drugs for various cancers. I have a friend. 4 months, like no, not the 4 months. I have a friend who has non-small cell carcinoma of the lung. Normally should have been dead in 2 years. She has now been cancer-free since 2009. This is 4 years, almost 5 years. She got her cancer in 2007, went on chemo and chemo and chemo and chemo and chemo. And finally her doctor said, we've got something to try for you. It's a nib. It's a brand new one. And this one has kept her cancer-free for 4 years now. So it's melanomas that are metastatic have been cancer-free. So we're really, truly, in the world of oncology, these folks are really getting excited. Look at this one, Tarceva, reduce the cravings for alcohol. You may be looking at, actually the gene was called happy hour. Isn't that clever? We have some actual researchers that have a sense of humor. That's rare. Anyway, so just more and more and more. I don't need to go through all of them, y'all, but for renal cell carcinoma, Tykerb for patients who don't respond to trastuzumab, sorafenib for patients with cancer of the liver. Who lives with that? Not many, but if it can give us extra time, we also have new drugs coming out every single day. That's what I tell people all the time with cancer. We have new drugs coming out almost every day. Do not give up. If somebody wants to try a new drug, it's oral. What could go wrong with an oral drug? Very few side effects. It's almost too good to be true. When's the other shoe going to drop? But they're coming out like crazy. So very exciting. We're even using some of these drugs for rheumatoid arthritis. So it's quite thrilling. If you're interested, you can certainly go and read more about these, but they're just phenomenal drugs. All right, and our last group of drugs here, which have also changed the world in terms of cancer patients, are the drugs that stop the nausea and vomiting from chemotherapy. These drugs also are approved for morning sickness, which means they are safe during pregnancy. They're called the triptans. They work by blocking serotonin receptors called 5-HT3 receptor. HT, by the way, is known as hydroxytryptamine, which is the chemical name for serotonin. So they block these receptors in the brainstem that's responsible for vomiting from chemo and anesthesia. That's another big one. When you go for surgery, you ask the anesthesiologist, do you give me Zofran before you bring me out of anesthesia? If he says, oh, nah, I don't believe in it, pick your purse and your panties up and go someplace else. You have never been in any surgery that, if you've ever had surgery and vomiting and vomiting and vomiting post-anesthesia, it's miserable. This drug stops it dead in its tracks. So if they say, oh, I don't believe in it, then they're an old-fashioned old fogey driving what to work? Horse and buggy. The other one they'll block you all is 5-HT3 receptors in your duodenum, which is responsible for nausea. Your duodenum is the organ of nausea. Isn't that amazing? When people say to you, I am so sick to my stomach, no, you're not. You are sick to your duodenum. If you're going to complain, at least complain right. So we now I'm an old peds oncology nurse. These kids would just throw. I had kids that would throw up 400 times a day from the drugs we gave them. The platinols, the nasty things, just vomit and vomit and vomit. So we'd give them Compazine. That made their heads spin around. They were vomiting on a circle. It was just horrible. We tried to give them metoclopramide, Reglan. Well, that could do the same thing with this tardive dyskinesia. It was just miserable. We shoved Tygan suppositories on. We tried everything. When these came along, it was absolutely a complete change in the way we treat these diseases. But we also had kids that would have what's called anticipatory nausea and vomiting. They would throw up when they saw you because they were trained to know that you were their chemo nurse, and they would vomit just looking at you. Now that made you feel really good. Hi, Barb. So I have to tell you a quick story. A friend of mine was a chemo nurse, and that's all she did. I at least had other things to do. But that's all she did. She worked in a doctor's office, and she had a kid that had bone cancer, osteogenic sarcoma, that had spread to his lungs. And they were giving him high-dose actinomycin and platinol and all sorts of drugs for 18 months. He came in every 3 weeks. And he had such bad anticipatory nausea and vomiting, he literally would walk in the door and just start throwing up. Every time he looked at her, he would vomit. So he'd try not to look at her. He'd literally just do this. So she'd give him the drugs. 18 months later, no evidence of disease. He was cured that moment. And he said to her, "Oh, God, I'm so glad I don't have to ever see you again." He said, "I really like you, but I'm just really tired of throwing up every time I see you." She said, "Well, I hope to never see you again, because that means you are cured of this disease, so bye-bye." 5 years later, she's in Woodfield Mall in Chicago. Christmas time. 5 years later, he's now 24 or something, married with a wife. She's walking down the mall with her husband. He's walking up the mall with his new wife. Their eyes met across a crowded mall, and he had projectile vomiting. 5 years later, this anticipatory nausea and vomiting is such a strong reaction. These drugs completely negate that because you're no longer vomiting, you all. You give them with Decadron. You give a little Decadron, a little bit of Zofran, ondansetron, you're good to go. So who are these drugs? Granisetron, ondansetron, dalasetron, palonesitron. These are all drugs known as Kytril, Zofran, Anzamet, Aloxi. Fabulous, phenomenal drugs. 4, chemotherapy, post-anesthesia-induced vomiting, migraine-induced nausea and vomiting. Take Zofran. Morning sickness and oral rehydration in kids. Give them Zofran. They don't have to have IVs, so they can drink their fluids. Just phenomenal. Alrighty, so that's the scoop on those. And last but not least, an all-in-one pill for the stress of being a wonderful nurse. Depressed, overworked, jobs suck, unappreciated, family problems, money worries. Here's a pill for you. Fucatol. 1,000 milligrams of Fucatol. When life just blows, Fucatol. So, thank you very much, y'all. Appreciate you coming today. It's been a pleasure coming back to Springfield. Any questions? I know you're probably ready to get out of here, but it's been great. Those of you who really quickly asked me about B12, you mentioned about the clot. I don't know anything about the shots, but you can get B12 in pills, under the tongue, up the nose, and a shot form. We typically reserve shots for B12 for people who have absorption problems or people who have significant side effects such as dementia or neuropathy. We will use the shots for them for B12 deficiency. I take a pill every day, 1,000 micrograms of B12. So, no, not that much. Okay. Yeah, multivitamins don't have 1,000.
If you're taking vitamin B12 because you're on BPI, is the pill effective?
Yes. All you need a day for a B12 is actually 2.4 milligrams. A pill, even if you don't have any acid in your stomach and no intrinsic factor, the absorption called passive diffusion is 1% of 1,000. And 1% of 1,000 is 10. All you need is 2.4, so you're getting plenty. If you really want to get a little bit more, put it under the tongue and suck on it. It then bypasses the stomach. Okay? Or shove it up your nose. So it's the 4 S's. You can swallow it, you can suck it, you can snort it, or you can shoot it. But B12 is good for you. Yeah.
On Varivax,
Uh-huh.
what have you seen in terms of studies for that long-term, kids that got that and didn't have the chicken pox?
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen?
Well, it depends on when they got it.
Got it after a year of age,
I know, but what year did she get it in?
2001.
Okay, so the ones that first came out were not that effective for long term. She only got one shot?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you get it before the age of 1, it doesn't work. Your immune system is not mature enough for it to actually work. We are now recommending 2 shots. So you get one at age 1, you can get another one right after that, but we're recommending 2. Huh?
I think she might have gotten it at age 5 as well.
The second one?
Yeah.
1 and 5. Okay, so 1 and 5, that's fine. If she did, she should have long-term protection from chickenpox. And it's about a 96% protection.
We're seeing it that it's given sometimes at the 18-month visit,
Uh-huh.
or 12 to 18-month visit, and it's given again at the kindergarten or pre-kindergarten
Yeah.
visit. And we're not seeing chickenpox anymore. In fact, if you have a case of chickenpox, it's reportable to the health department. So
Okay.
that's how gone chickenpox is.
Yeah. The only one we're really worried more about is the pertussis. That's just waning. It's not working. It's not lasting a long time. And then we have idiot parents that are not vaccinating. So we now have a whole group of pertussis outbreaks, but not chickenpox.
Right.
But the pertussis vaccine is also flawed. We don't know why it's not lasting. That's our biggest problem, besides the parents that are not vaccinating. And they should be shot. That's easy. Take them out and shoot them. How many of y'all think that people should have an IQ test before they can become a parent? All right, bye-bye. Thank you. Pleasure.